So let's talk about 5 of the most problematic champions in League of Legends. And what I mean by that is champions are just really hard to get into a good place balance-wise. You know, some of these are actually worked on and they're really trying hard to get them into a good place, and some of them are mostly just kind of ignored for what I imagine will be larger reworks down the line. But I try to pick champions that have a lot of different issues so we can really examine different ways that a champion's kit can go wrong. First we have Ryze, and to me there's 2 really kind of core issues that make Ryze really hard to get into a good place. The first one is that they insist on having him scale with mana, which is fine because it's kind of like a unique quirk to his character, but it also means that it's really hard to keep the balance consistent on him. Now, it's not really hard to balance it in the moment, right? You know exactly how much mana and AP he's probably going to have with different builds, and you can kind of balance his damage output around that. But the problem is that down the line, anytime you change any of those items, you're going to disproportionately affect Ryze. So let's just take a random example. If we were to just increase the amount of mana that was on Rod of Ages, that's going to affect Ryze in a much different way than it's going to affect everybody else that builds that item, right? And if you have enough of those changes that kind of come together, you can end up with Ryze in a much different place than he would be even if you didn't change his actual balance at all. So you constantly have to be going back and really thinking about the implications of changes in a different light than you might normally. Secondarily is that the idea of having a short range mage who does a lot of damage if you let him get close is interesting and it's fine, and most of the time if he just uses a speed boost to run up and W you, it probably means you didn't respect kind of the area you need to give him enough, and that's fine. But we live in a world where we have flash, right? And what that means is that even though it's on a long cooldown, we're giving a gap closer to something that probably shouldn't have it. If the idea is that he's a short range mage and he can lock you down if he gets close, is really kind of blown open by the fact that he has access to that flash. And so you have to ask yourself, is a short range instant cast CC mage something that can kind of exist in League of Legends or not? It certainly makes it a lot more difficult to balance. Second, we have what is probably everybody's favorite banana throwing unicorn with Soraka. And I really feel like Soraka is set up to fail by giving her the niche of best healer. Because if that's what she's bringing to the table, it's really important that she's really good at it, right? She's not bringing a lot of the other utility or damage or anything like that, so she has to be really good at healing to be picked. But every time she is good at healing, she gets nerfed, and every time she's really bad at healing, she gets buffed to make her healing better, or trying some kind of new design where she has to do something else to heal. It's a little bit different, it's balanced a little bit differently, it's tied to a different skill, but it always comes down to, is she capable of healing more than anybody else? And if she is, then she's probably going to get nerfed, and if she's not, then she's probably not going to get picked, and so she's kind of caught in this loop there. We've seen them really try to force her out and say, okay, if you want to be a god healer, you got to get a little bit closer and you got to go hit some Qs, right? Which is great, which is like an idea of, okay, how do we handle that dynamic? We want her to be really great at healing, but we also don't want her to be really safe and, passive to play. And it kind of just means she Qs the front line that's hitting your front line once in a while, and then her heals are really great. And she still plays that really safe way, she really brings the heals. So the thing is, you can give her more utility or damage or something like that, but then at the end of the day you have 2 Sonas, right? So how do we make her kind of dynamic of being the best healer in the game healthy? It's a very difficult question to answer. Third, we have Shaco, which is a great champion for this list, right? Because stealth is already really hard to balance. We've seen the Overwatch devs kind of talk about how hard it was to try to make a stealth hero for that game. They certainly haven't made it work yet. We might have one coming someday, but for now, they decided it wasn't going to work. We saw Heroes of the Storm try to handle it by making them all shimmery, and that really didn't do a great job. They still have a ton of problems with their stealth heroes. And it's not really an exception in League either, but not only does Shaco have stealth, he also has the ability to go over walls. He has a disjointing ult that makes it clone, he's got traps. I mean, he just is a big box of shit that's really hard to deal with, right? And it really turns him into kind of this feast or famine character. We all know the thing, every Shaco on my team feeds and everyone on the enemy team is a golden god, right? We all know that that's a thing, and it's because he's so feast or famine. If he's able to get ahead, then he has all these tools to use that lead in really aggressive, sneaky, brutal ways to really punish all of your lanes, right? But if he doesn't, if he gets weak, it doesn't really matter if he comes in sneakily because he's just going to die before he does enough damage, right? So he has this very binary factor to him that just kind of really makes that line hard to draw. If he's too easy to get ahead with, if it's something that a lot of people can do easily, he's just going to be way too strong way too often. And so he kind of occupies this middle ground where, low-level players aren't going to pilot him well enough to get ahead consistently, and high-level players aren't going to let him get ahead consistently enough to do well. I know there's some exceptions to that rule probably, but I don't even think they are. I think those still have a very feast or famine style play to them. But we don't see any attempts at really trying to fix it, right? Because it's so dangerous to try to give him more power, more strength, or, to streamline him. Because again, if he's able to pull it off, stealth is just such a snowball-y mechanic. Evelynn is something you could easily put on this list just because of the stealth, and they've tried really hard with her, and it's still very, very difficult to balance Evelynn, and she doesn't have, half of the weird mechanics that Shaco is bringing to the table. Fourth, we have Singed, and I love this one because he was so stupid that they changed game mechanics to help deal with how stupid his kit was. And something that's really important is because we have so much mobility in League of Legends right now, right? Like pretty much everybody has some way of doing something to get away. Singed is much better at running away from people than he is at running towards them, because yeah, he can fling them and he can slow them and stuff, but they can kind of still just probably run away from him. But if you can make people have to run after you, it's much more difficult to avoid that damage, right? And his kit is really good at making it hard for people to stick at him long enough and do enough damage for them to actually threaten him if he's forcing them to chase after him. And so we had this proxy Singed strategy, which is amazing at utilizing that whole I want to run away from you thing, where he would go behind your turret and he would farm the wave, and you have options, right? You can try to chase him and you're gonna miss your wave and gonna be really hard, or you can ignore him and he's gonna have perfect CS and you have to eat turret damage and try to lessen a turret and potentially mess them up and get behind. And even if you were choosing to chase him and kill him, he was worth less and less gold, and as the game went on he was going to get harder and harder to chase down because again he's so good at running away, and you got into this position where it just became impossible to justify chasing him, but it also became impossible to ignore him because he was chain farming everything on the whole map, right? And it is just a thing of beauty. And so how do you do that when he refuses to get kills, he refuses to do anything but farm everything and become rich? They decided that, okay, when you're getting CS, your bounty's going to go up. Even if you're not getting kills, you can't just tank it to 0 or, near enough to 0 and then just be there for a long time. And that really kind of put that playstyle mostly to rest. There's some very dedicated feeders out there, but for the most part, that strategy is kind of gone, right? And so now it's very difficult to say, okay, how do I make people run at me while I run away? It's not really a mechanic that exists too well in this game, but the problem is if you just make him better at running at people, that's very bland. We have Scion, we have Swain, we have things that are really good at that already, that again, part of the reason why you're not going to pick Singed just because there's just people that do it better already. But how do you make somebody that's good at running away and it's actually a compelling game mechanic? I'm not sure, but this is a hard one, at least if you're like me and you think that that is an important part of the flavor of his kit. Lastly, we have my boy Rengar. I love talking about Rengar. He has the biggest problem with Rengar is that he has these really binary team fights, right? Because he either gets the kill on the target he's looking for and it's great, or he doesn't and he's garbage. And they did an entire rework of him to try to fix that problem, and the exact same situation came right back. I actually did a video on my personal channel a long time ago when that rework first came out about why it failed and why he still had the same problems. And I kind of break it down more in depth there, but again, it really is just a problem of it being so binary. He either gets the kill or he doesn't. It's kind of like we talked about Shaco being feast or famine, right? He's either going to go off or he's not. And Rengar is like that, but it's based on individual team fight. But that same kind of binary pattern is still there. So that's 5 of the most problematic kits in League of Legends. I just think this stuff is pretty interesting. I like talking about this stuff. Obviously, we can go into more depth on a lot of this stuff, and I would love to hear you guys' thoughts in the comments and stuff like that. Obviously, making solutions is kind of the fun part, and maybe we can talk about that. Next time, I really want to talk about 5 of the opposite, 5 of the champion kits that are just brilliant, beautiful works of art, and I'm going to have some controversial stuff on there because there's some stuff that I love, and we'll talk about that, and it'll be great. But for now, I will see you guys next time.